While the New York Mets still have a chance to do something special this season, they also have 6 top 100 prospects in AA or higher, which means the future might even be brighter than the present for the New York Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show from the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, if there was ever a time to push the New York Mets to the back burner and focus on their prospects, it's today. It's the day after they nearly got no hit and were swept by the Guardians. If you want a game recap and you want to relive that and you can actually want to experience my viewing of the bottom of the ninth inning as Juan Soto hit that home run to break up the no-hitter, I went live right when that bottom of the ninth started and did a live stream, which is up on your podcast feeds and, of course, the YouTube channel. So you can check that out if you really want to spend some time dwelling on it. But let's look ahead to the future, because the New York Mets have a really good farm system, and I want to talk about what they preserved at the trade deadline, because this was a market that I think the Mets navigated well despite what's happened since the deadline. There was not a lot available when it came to the bats that could be traded for. They got a center fielder in Cedric Mullins. There was not a lot available when it came to the starting pitchers they could trade for. We've talked about that on this show. I don't need to reiterate it. When it comes to the bullpen, the Mets, it was a market that they could attack, and they did that, and their bullpen's much better, and we'll see how it plays out this season. But they were able to hold on to all of their real top prospects. While Blade Tidwell and Drew Gilbert might have been featured on some top 10 list, depending on the outlet that you were looking at, these guys were ultimately players that could have been 40-man roster casualties at some point, where you'd prefer to have a Carson Benge as another outfielder on your 40 next year instead of Drew Gilbert. You may prefer to have Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, and Jonah Tong on your 40-man roster next year instead of Blade Tidwell. So you traded from areas of your farm system that you were willing to get the upgrades you needed for this season, but also keeping that runway clear and the ability to see your farm system, which is now one of the best in baseball, come up in 2026 and beyond and really help this team. So let's start with what I'm calling the Fab Four of Binghamton, or the Bingo Fab Four, whatever you want to call them. The Mets have some really good hitters in that AA lineup right now. They have two, no doubt about it, top 100 guys leading things off in that lineup with Jett Williams and Carson Benge. You have a guy in Ryan Clifford who might make some top 100 lists going to next season, has a lot of power. And you have a guy in Jacob Reimer who is a top 100 prospect for us over at Just Baseball. I don't know if any other outlets have him on the top 100 just yet, but he is another power hitting prospect. He's over at third base. So they have a lot of talent on that roster, but we're going to focus on the top 4 hitters, particularly the top 2 hitters, because what you can be really excited about is the fact that the Mets held on to Jett Williams and Carson Benge, and these guys could be everyday players at some point next season. That is how good they are. Jett Williams has played 93 games so far in AA this season, 10 home runs, 5 triples, 29 doubles, 29 stolen bases, hitting 282, 389 on base, 484 slug. He has an 873 OPS. Last year, he only played 33 games and dealt with a wrist injury that really slowed his play, I think, before he went down and after. So you sort of just throw that out as a lost year. If you go back to 2023, his breakout season, Jett Williams started in low A, finished in double A, primarily played low A and high A, and then at the end of the year, they brought him up to play a couple games and then be part of the playoff run in Binghamton that year. If you compare his stats, though, in 23 to 25, he has exactly one more extra base hit right now, and he's played in, again, 93 games compared to 121 games across the 3 levels in 2023. He's added about 20 points to his batting average. His on-base percentage has dropped about 30 points, but that makes sense. You're talking about, again, a 2023 season where he started the year and put up absurd numbers in low A before, doing the same really in high A. This is a tougher level of competition, going to be a little bit harder to get on base, but it's impressive that his slug has ticked way up and has accounted for that difference. So, 30 points of drop in on base percentage, but 30 points of additional slug this year. That's really rounding himself into the type of player that could be very, very valuable at the big league level. He's a shortstop, but he's played plenty of center field and second base this year. I think long term, if you're looking at the Mets roster with Francisco Lindor, obviously there is no spot for Jett Williams to play shortstop. So second base, center field is where he's going to be competing for playing time next year primarily. And I think he can play either position. Center field, he's more just going to be getting by on his athleticism. Second base, I think you could be talking about an elite defensive second baseman. When you move a guy with his athleticism off his shortstop and slide him to second, the range would be great over there. That would really help somebody like Pete Alonso on the right side of the infield if he comes back. And I think if you're trying to figure out what type of an offensive profile he could bring to a big league roster, I don't know if he get there immediately as far as this level of production, but I'd be thinking 40 doubles, 10 to 15 homers, mix some triples in there. So a guy that, could get 60 extra base hits from the leadoff spot, score a bunch of runs, steal a bunch of bases. He is an ideal leadoff hitter because he has great plate discipline, can work long counts, can draw his walks, get on base, set the table. I don't know if he'd bat leadoff immediately. I think more likely you'd be looking at a 9-hole hitter that can turn the lineup over and give you a really exciting player that can really turn things over. He's just a prospect that has such a high floor, where worst case scenario, you're talking about a better version of what Acuna's done this year. But honestly, I think he's going to be a regular, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the second baseman of the future. Then you move over to Carson Benge. In 60 games in high A, he hit 302, 417 on base, 480 slug, 18 doubles, 5 triples, 4 home runs, stole 15 bases, had an 897 OPS. It is very hard to leave the yard in Brooklyn playing in that ballpark. He has very much enjoyed the promotion up to Double-A. Last year, you might remember Ryan Clifford was struggling mightily in Brooklyn, and they promoted him to Binghamton just to get him out of there. This year, Benge more earned the promotion, and he has been earning another one ever since, to be honest. 28 games played in Double-A, he's hitting 349, 437 on base, 633 slug, a 1070 OPS. He has 8 home runs in 28 games, 5 doubles and a triple, 23 RBIs, scored 27 runs. He was just named the Eastern League Player of the Month for July. And that's what probably his first full month in that league. He wins the Player of the Month. It's really impressive. You're talking about a guy that when they drafted him, Chris Gross, who now runs the Mets draft last year, first round pick, he was talking about a 5-tool potential in center field, and you're seeing that. Might not be an elite defender in center field, but he's going to be solid. He'd probably be well above average in a corner. A former pitcher, he was a two-way guy in college. He's got a big arm, so that would play in right field, but it's also going to help him out in center field, and he's got enough athleticism to stick out there. So he's right now the most obvious center fielder of the future the Mets have had in a very long time. And so we'll see when he gets up. It's hard to peg exactly what the power potential is going to be because he's so early into his professional career. What he's done in the last month, forecasts a much better power potential than obviously what he was doing in high A. The 8 home runs in 28 games, you're dreaming on 30 home run power. I think it's more likely to bet on him being more of a 20-30 guy, 20 home runs, 30 stolen bases, could even be more just with the way that the Mets are able to steal bases at the big league level. But he's got the speed to do it, and he's also been pretty efficient this year with 19 bags. So you look at these two guys, neither of them runs crazy strikeout rates. Jett's around 23% this year. Benge even more palatable at 16%, and they're both walking a bunch, around 14, 15%. Benge is actually, since he's got up to Double-A, he's been walking more than he struck out. Very close, but slightly more walks than strikeouts. With Carson Benge, at Just Baseball, we just ranked him at number 19 on our top 100. I think there's every chance that he ends up sneaking into the top 10 by opening day next year, and we'll see if he gets that recognition from the other outlets too. But these are two guys that could be huge pieces of your team next year. And then the other two guys, part of the bingo top 4, Fab Four, whatever you want to call them. You got Nick Morabito, who I think at this point is a more likely 4th outfielder than a starting center fielder, but he does give you that depth to the farm system. So with Drew Gilbert gone, he's now right there with Carson Benge as far as next up in center field. This year he's in 279, 349 on base, 406 slug, has doubled more this year than he did last year, and has played, less, 30 games less than last year, a little bit more than that last. So, you're seeing him improve in some areas, being able to add a little more slug. He wasn't going to be able to sustain the high batting average that he put up last season at lower levels, just because the fielders are better. He was getting a lot of infield hits, but Morabito has held his own in his first season in Double-A, and so that's been a good sign. And then Ryan Clifford has finally kind of gotten to the point where you can say there has been some improvements compared to what he did last year. The OPS has finally ticked up a bit. The power has now exceeded what he's done last year, and he's got a real chance to maybe lead the yard 30 times this year. He's at 23 home runs so far this season. He's driven in 72. This is your next big bat in the minor leagues that could be your first baseman of the future, depending on what the Mets do with Pete Alonso. And even if not, he's still playing in the corners a little bit in left field and right, has a big arm. So there is a chance that he could stick in a corner outfield spot, first base more likely. But these are a couple more prospects in Clifford and Morabito that are just getting closer to the big leagues. I wouldn't expect them necessarily to make an impact next year, but if you needed a big left-handed bat who has great plate discipline, Clifford could be your man. If you need a fourth outfielder at some point, that could be Nick Morabito. So it just shows you that next wave that is coming. But what we're really going to get excited about is Jett and Benge potentially being starters for the Mets next season. And we'll be talking about that in the final segment, as I will give you sort of an outlook of where the Mets roster in 2026 stands with some of these prospects factored in. But I want to talk about the pitching side of things next. The guy that is still in Binghamton that probably doesn't need to be much longer, Jonah Tong, who you can argue is the most dominant pitcher in minor league baseball this year. We'll talk about Tong. We'll talk about Sproat, McLean, get to some of the arms here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason's already heating up and college football isn't far behind. It's the perfect time to lock in your season-long, more or less picks for the 2025 football season, all before week 1 kicks off. Whether you've got your eye on a big-name quarterback or a breakout running back, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. I've already made a couple of my season-long picks. The one that jumped out to me was Josh Allen, more or less on 27.5 touchdowns. Feels like a pretty solid chance that he's going to get more. So that's what I took. And the flex play option is a total game changer, because even if one of your picks misses, you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's go LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. Also, make sure you have the notification bell on so you know when the channel goes live or when a new episode drops. Chris Schubert does a great job giving you your Locked On Mets postcast after every Mets game. Right after the final out, he's going live. So if you want that instant reaction to everything going on with the Mets, make sure you check out the postcast and subscribe to our channel here with Locked On Mets. Now, let's talk about the pitching side of things. Jonah Tong has been unbelievable this year. 19 starts, 97 innings pitched, a 1.58 ERA, 154 strikeouts to lead minor league baseball with only 44 walks. His whip is under 1 at 0.94. He's only allowed 2 home runs all season. And if you look back, he allowed 3 earned runs in each of his first 2 starts. He has not allowed more than 2 runs in any other start this season. He's only allowed 2 earned runs twice. So 15 of his 19 starts, it's either been 1 earned run allowed or nothing. There's not much left for Jonah Tong to prove in Double-A. But I wonder if the Mets are keeping him there, dominating, leading that rotation, because they're trying to cultivate some winning among their top prospects. And maybe they believe in a special group they have in Binghamton, and they want them to go on this ride of a season together, because that could bode well for their ability to then contribute next year, the year beyond that, even further down the road. If these guys are learning how to be a winning team together. There's so many top prospects in Binghamton right now. You look at those 4 atop the lineup. You can make an argument for Jett Williams to go up to AAA. But how much more is he going to develop facing AAA pitching compared to Double-A pitching, playing in that environment, compared to this environment in Double-A where it really matters? These guys really care about the playoffs. And winning at this level. You have guys that are still trying to establish themselves, more prospects instead of guys who are just waiting to get that call back up to the big leagues. And so maybe there's something to be said about keeping these guys together in Double-A, including this week. You got 6 weeks left before the playoffs. And, for Tong, that would mean maybe 25 starts in Double-A this season. You can do worse, and if he keeps on adding up innings and they keep getting him to a point where, let's just say, he averages 5.5 innings per start. Obviously, you don't pitch a half inning start, but he might go a little bit more on some, a little bit less than others. Let's just say he's at 97 innings pitched. Let's just call it 33 innings pitched over his next 6 starts there. And he's at 130 innings before the playoffs. He can pitch in the playoffs. And if they want to, they could then, even after the playoffs, stick him in AAA for a couple more starts and have him go even further than that. The other option is just to call him up right now, and that might happen. I mean, that could happen next week. I mean, he has pitched well enough that he deserves to get up to AAA. But I would keep that in mind if you're wondering why Tong and Jett, if they both end up playing out this season in Double-A, I think that's what it's about. Binghamton is the best team in minor league baseball. I mean, depending on how you're looking at it, but you look at the record, 69-33. That's as good as it gets. The Tigers right now in that same Eastern League, they're in the Southwest Division. They're 61-42. The Mets or the Rumble Ponies are in a great spot right now when it comes to the playoffs because they've already made it. They won their division by 10 games in the first half, but they're even leading in the second half. So this is a team that could lead their division wire to wire and then has a chance to go into the playoffs and win a Double-A championship. I think that's something that could matter to these guys and something the Mets might really value. So that's the only thing that I would look at when it comes to Tong sitting in Double-A and Jett sitting in Double-A. Well, I think they both sort of earned that promotion up to Triple, is maybe they believe that they're going to get more valuable development time being part of a team for the whole season, being part of a marathon the whole year where they still feel like they're getting challenged, but also they've been able to have great success and lead winning. Maybe that's what happens here in Double-A. Now, Benge is a little bit of a different case because he hasn't been with the Double-A team all year and he's putting up absurd numbers. And I'm sure if the Mets offense keeps sputtering and Benge keeps on hitting, there's going to be a lot of people saying, oh, Michael Conforto was called up in 2015. Might as well call up Benge. I doubt that happens. I really do. I mean, you've seen it. Evan Carter a couple of years ago got called up late and helped a team that won the World Series with the Rangers. Funny thing, though, he then kind of spiraled, in the next couple of years after that and hasn't been the same player since. I don't know if it's because he got rushed up. I sort of doubt that. But regardless, it would take the Mets really struggling to go to that. And I think for Carson Benge, it's been an incredible month and change in Double-A. You can keep him there for the whole season. He's fine. He doesn't have to see any AAA competition this year, and that doesn't even prevent him from making the roster next year. Now, when we talk about the other pitchers in the top 100, Sproat, McLean, it's a conversation that's been ongoing on this show because they very well could be in the big leagues this season. And funny enough, you check the International League standings. In the first half, the Syracuse Mets were brutal, 31-44. In the second half, they got the top record. They're tied for the top record in their division at 27-8. Part of that is because they've had an outstanding three-headed monster in their AAA rotation: Brandon Sproat, Nolan McLean, and Paul Blackburn. Joking a little bit about Blackburn, but for real, he actually has helped that team a lot win games. I'm sure he's been pretty damn good in AAA. But getting to the prospects, Sproat won the Pitcher of the Month in AAA in the International League for last month. Had a 0.67 ERA in 5 starts with 33 strikeouts to 8 walks. You look at his month of June, he had 15 strikeouts to 13 walks. So he more than doubled his amount of strikeouts in the same amount of starts. He had less walks. He also averaged more than 1 additional inning per start compared to the month of June. I think it was 21 1/3 innings pitched in June and 27 innings pitched in July. So Sproat very well could be knocking on the door, and that's something we might talk about on tomorrow's show potentially if he does not make a start on Thursday because he was lined up to pitch on Wednesday. They went with Brandon Waddell, and I'm starting to have my little spidey senses tingling here that we could see Sproat on Saturday pitching in some combined capacity with Frankie Montas, although that very well could be Paul Blackburn. Who knows what the Mets might decide to do when it comes to their rotation. But again, Sproat could be knocked out on the door with that incredible month that he just had. And let's not forget, while Brandon Sproat has had a rough season, and it was a brutal start for him, this was the top pitching prospect in the Mets system going into the year. And I always talk about how development is not linear. Don't be surprised if Brandon Sproat still ends up having the better career of the three between him, McLean, and Tong. I would not just write this guy off because he had a couple of bad months in AAA, especially when we just saw him at the highest level of the minor leagues across an entire month absolutely dominate. And so that reminds you how good this guy could be. And we could, again, see it as soon as this weekend or at some point down the stretch, whether it is as a starting pitcher or if they decide to shorten up him and or McLean. Now, McLean, he's just been so consistent this year, 2.81 ERA in AAA. Started the year in AA, was obviously too good for that level, came up to triple, and it's just been good start after start after start, month after month after month. He has also earned him a potential promotion to the big leagues, depending on roster need and what the Mets decide to do. But those two guys are going to be in the mix next year. So the question is, how do you fit all of these pieces together, particularly in the rotation? Because there's going to be a glut of starters. There's going to be a lot of young players that are going into spring training, vying for playing time with the young guys that are currently on the roster, as well as some of these top prospects. So where do the Mets go next year? What could the 2026 Mets look like? We're going to touch on that to close out the show here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ballpark with your friends or family? Well, Game Time is going to get you into the park, and it's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With Game Time, buying tickets is fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. You can get incredible deals on last-minute tickets where you can see your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You get that lowest price guarantee to take the worry out of buying. My dad's actually heading to Milwaukee this weekend to catch a couple of the games with my brother-in-law and his grandson. So they're going to have a good time out there. And I told them, just wait. There's going to be tickets available on Game Time, and you're going to be able to get a great deal. So they're going to do that to go to a couple of these games. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Like if you are in the area and want to catch Mets Brewers this weekend, you can do so. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So let's just imagine here what the best possible homegrown infused lineup could be for the Mets next season. Let's say Carson, Benge, and Jett Williams both break camp, and they're going to be in the starting lineup. Here's what you could roll out. Brandon Nimmo in left leading off, Lindor at short, Soto in right, Pete Alonso at first. That's assuming they keep Pete. We'll talk about that in a sec here. Ronnie Mauricio, I have as my third baseman, Mark Vientos as the DH, Carson, Benge in center, Francisco Alvarez as your catcher, and Jett Williams at second base, with a bench of McNeil, Acuna, Beatty, Tyrone Taylor, and Luis Torrens. That's too many position players for one roster because the Mets are probably going to have to make a move this offseason and trade one of their young infielders. I don't know which one it's going to be. You could also tell me that it's Brett Beatty as your starting third baseman and Ronnie Mauricio gets moved. It could be Beatty and Mauricio on the roster. Vientos gets moved and that DH spot is more flexible because who knows? Maybe you want to get to a point where Juan Soto's not out in right field very much because you have the ability to stick Jeff McNeil out there or put Carson, Benge out there with Jett Williams in center. There's a lot of things that can happen next year. But just on the surface, if you're talking about what this team can do, to be able to put Carson, Benge in center field and potentially set it and forget it for the next 6 years, that's really exciting when you still have, I think after this would be 5 years left on Nimmo and, of course, 14 years left of Soto. that could be your outfield for some time. Now, when I first was trying to fill this out, I completely forgot about Jeff McNeil, honestly. I had a bench of Acuna, Beatty, Taylor, and Torrens, and then I was like, wait a minute, am I missing somebody? I had to go to the big league roster and be like, oh yeah, Jeff McNeil. And I would say that Jeff McNeil does make it, in my opinion, a little bit harder for a Jett Williams to break camp at second base, because especially off the season that McNeil has put together here, you might still just have Jeff at your starting second baseman and let Jett start the year on AAA and sort of earn that promotion. But you never know how things are going to shake out in spring training. But again, it's just so much depth. The real question comes down to what the Mets do this offseason with Pete Alonso, and that's a conversation to have in the offseason. With the year that Pete has had, the function that he has on the roster, when you look at the free agent market, the top bats that are available, he still fits this team the most. It's Kyle Tucker, Kyle Schwarber, Pete Alonso, Eugenio Suarez, and Bo Bichette are sort of what I would look at as sort of the top five right now. I'll dive into that stuff more at a later date, but Bo Bichette doesn't fit. Eugenio Suarez will be a year older, and I think it's pretty clear the Mets have enough infielders to figure out third base. Schwarber, if you sign him, I can almost guarantee you Pete Alonso is signing with the Phillies. So take that trade-off if you want to. Schwarber has been a better hitter. I get that, but it's also your guy versus their guy and the whole deal. And I don't know, put Pete Alonso in Citizens Bank and have him hitting behind Bryce Harper. I would absolutely hate that, and Bryce Harper campaigned for it this past offseason. So to me, let's just make this a simple exercise and say Pete comes back. And yeah, you probably trade one of the young infielders, and likely not Jett Williams. We're more looking at the four guys that have been on the roster this year: Mauricio, Vientos, Beatty, and Acuna, and who knows where things are going to lead on that front. But that's where you're at right now when you're looking at the New York Mets. They're really in a position where if they bring Pete back, I mean, they probably don't have to sign any free agent bats. Now, I say that, and you're thinking, but this team right now can't hit. Look, you'd have to be another year down the road with some of these young players that are getting big league exposure. The expectation would be that Carson, Benge, and or Jett Williams could really make an impact, and you would think that you're going to get a better season out of some of your star players next year too. The Mets are in a really good spot with their position player group is the bottom line. And again, yeah, they're probably setting up for a trade this offseason, but it could be one of those infielders, and they still have plenty of guys to fill out a roster. I think the Mets go into spring training next year, and they will also, I should have mentioned, they have Jose Siri also still has 2 more years of arbitration. If they don't non-tender him, and he's going to be pretty cheap, so they probably wouldn't. They could always just do that in spring training or make a trade in spring training. They can go into spring with Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Jett Williams, and Carson, Benge, even Acuna to some degree, all competing for center field reps, knowing that you always have the Jeff McNeil break glass in case of emergency. And very well, that could be a situation where Benge wins a job. So I'm really excited about that potential next year, where Carson, Benge could be a guy that breaks camp a la Jackson Merrill last year, and maybe is a rookie of the year candidate. So it's really exciting that they have a prospect that is this talented. Now you go to the rotation, just MLB guys, before we even get to the prospects. Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, and Tyler McGill are all under contract for next year. Now, I think there's a good chance that they consolidate in some way, whether that is eating some money and offloading a Montas, whether that is trading Tyler McGill. There's a chance that I could see one of those guys potentially being moved. But also you can roll with all of them, and then it's going to be a very crowded rotation for the top prospects to try to break in. You got Brandon Sproat, you got Nolan McLean, you got Jonah Tong, and you still have Christian Scott, who was spending this entire year rehabbing off of, I believe he got both procedures. I believe he got both the Tommy John and the internal brace. So he just has a completely reconstructed elbow, which who knows how many innings he's going to have, what he's going to look like next year. But that when he comes back next year, it'll be after having this entire season rehabbing. They said it very early on. They were keeping Christian Scott out of live competition this year. We've gotten no updates on him, but that doesn't mean anything bad. I think this is just, when you have a guy that gets TJ later on in the game where there's going to be no shot that he's really going to make a real impact on the mound at the end of the season. I think this is just a way to sort of ease him in, not worry about it, and have him just focus on rehab and focus on getting strong for 26. And remember, he was the Mets' top pitching prospect last year. he was the guy that we were pinning our hopes to more than a Sproat, McLean, or a Tong. So having those 4 guys as your depth going into next season when you already have 6 viable starting pitchers, it means the Mets likely won't be shopping in the starting pitching market when it comes to free agency. Now, could they consolidate? Could they trade one of these pitching prospects and try to get another frontline arm? Could they trade a McGill and McLean together and get Joe Ryan or do something crazy if they want to? Potentially. But again, those are conversations for the offseason. If you're thinking about this team now and you're looking at the current run, you're saying, man, the Mets really should have traded for Garrett Crochet in the offseason. It's hard to argue against that when you see the year that Crochet has put up. But what I will say is all the prospects the Mets could have put on the table a year ago have improved their stock this season, with the exception being Brandon Sproat, because Sproat struggled for most of the year. But in a month, I think he's almost erased those struggles and got his stock to a near neutral level. So all of these prospects have gained value, and how that value helps the Mets in future trades or on their big league roster is to be determined. Maybe they missed their boat on an ace, and they certainly did because of what Crochet is doing. But I understand why the Mets didn't make that move at the time, wanting to see these guys develop more. And you would have been trading way too soon on a Carson bench or a Jett Williams and trading lower, where maybe you'd had to give up more in a trade, where now this offseason, if they decided to put Jett Williams on the table, maybe you don't have to put one of the top arms on the table to swing whatever huge trade you're trying to swing. And I'm not saying the Mets should trade Jett Williams or any of these guys, but it's just about, asset management. And when it comes to your prospects, obviously you want them to contribute to big league level, but they're all assets. And I think the only one that you can make a case for having had more value and should have been traded, not I say should have, but having value that was higher then than it is now, that maybe you could have capitalized on in a Crochet trade, would have been Brandon Sproat. But aside from trades, aside from talking about any of that, if you just look at where the Mets are at as a franchise, it's not to say, hey, give up on 2025, it's over. There's still a stretch run here, and I know it was a really frustrating series, and it's been a frustrating couple of weeks or however long it's been since that Padres series started. It's been rough the last 10 days or whatever it's been. I get that for sure. But the Mets are still in a good position here to make the playoffs, and really a great position to make the playoffs, as long as they get their act together. And once they get there, they have a great bullpen. They have star players in their lineup. They can get hot. Any team can get hot at the right time. And maybe the Mets win the World Series in 2025, and it's an incredible season after all. The good news is, regardless of what happens in 2025, though, when you are looking at a farm system that really has been rebuilding since the Steve Cohen era, you can almost point to the PCA trade, as from that point on, the Mets have been rebuilding their farm system. And honestly, trading PCA at the time was, partially to keep everybody else in the farm. Retrospect, of course, you'd rather have traded Brett Beatty in that deal than Pete Crow Armstrong, but hindsight's 2020. You look at what they've done across the Steve Cohen era, and particularly since David Stearns came into the fold here, this farm system is healthy. This farm system has 6 top 100 guys, and you have AJ Ewing and Ryan Clifford that are fringe top 100. Different outlets might put some of those guys in the top 100. You have other pitching prospects, Jonathan Santucci, Jack Weninger, guys that are in AA and are having success. It's just a very deep system right now, which gives you all the flexibility in the world to be active in every market at all times. So when the next Crochet comes available, instead of having to give up your top 2 prospects to get a deal done, you might be able to trade like the Red Sox did, where, Kyle Teal might have been their 3rd best prospect, but really they went into those trade negotiations saying, we want to keep Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, and Christian Campbell, and they kept their big 3 and got a deal done without trading them. The Mets are going to be in the position soon here to be able to be in any trade talks and still hold on to the guys that they really want to keep, and have the guys that they'd be a little more willing to move that are still able to get deals done, just like they did at this trade deadline, trading largely relievers and reliever prospects to get relievers to bolster their bullpen. So yes, this year we'll see what happens. It could be a down year ultimately, or not down year, but a disappointing year. 2026, 2027, 2028, the New York Mets are going to get some really big contributors coming up from the minor leagues, and they have a chance to have a really strong window of being the team in the National League East. I really think they have the best future in this division, and I don't know how close it is. I'll be honest. I mean, the Phillies have a really good team. The Braves, obviously, you can't count them out, but the combination of what's on the MLB roster and what's waiting in the farm system, I think the Mets have the best standing right now in this division. Anyway, that's going to be all for this episode of Locked On Mets. After this little minor league refresher, we will get right back to the Major League team on tomorrow's show, preview the series against the Brewers, who are right now the best team in baseball. How can the Mets find their way to a victory? Will we learn anything about what the plan is on Saturday when it comes to who's going to make that start? Is it Montas? Is it Blackburn? Is it Brandon Sproat? There'll be a lot to discuss on that show. So make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to that next goal of 15,000 subscribers. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that takes you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts, as well as our league-wide experts that'll take you through all the action. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.